Good evening, everyone. I know we have a few folks that are coming from what I assume was a wonderful time under the tent tonight. My name is Joe Rulowich. Let's clap for the tent. I love it. The good news is you have to walk by the tent again to get to the EXP night, so you may linger. Again, my name is Joe Rulowich, and as the Director of College Counseling at Petty, and on behalf of all of my colleagues on our college counseling team, Lisa, Everett, Grant, and Ann, we are thrilled to see you in person. It's exciting to welcome you back to campus. This is the first time you all have been back together in person, and we don't take that lightly. So we're very excited. And if you're not with us in person, wherever you are, whenever you are across states, countries, and time zones, we welcome you watching on the live feed. It seems like it took a pandemic to keep us physically apart for such an extended long time. And now something almost as powerful, almost as pervasive, is bringing us all back together: college admissions. I have in parentheses insert nervous laughter, so thank you for adding that. Whatever your personal interests, curiosities, and questions surrounding such an important topic, and important to your students as well, we're thrilled to be with you in community to engage in a thoughtful conversation together about all things college-related. As you know, and you should know because there will be a test at the end of this, Petty's mission statement, and if you can stand up and recite the whole mission statement, I'll welcome that. Petty's mission statement states that we prepare our students for the rigors and rewards of college. But that's not the whole phrase. It starts with "not only." And that "not only" is really important because we also challenge our students, your students, to reach beyond their expectations and to measure their growth and to measure the growth they experience over time, whether they're here for 4 years or as short as 1. And we want them to define their success by the progress they make. That's in our mission. And our college counseling program is mission-driven. It always has been. So we talk about growth and we talk about reaching, which is also in our mission statement, to reach beyond their expectations. Now at Petty, we also talk about a couple other words. We talk about enthusiasm, humor, and patience. All three are required in equal measure for the college search, from students and from you as parents, especially that last one, patience. With early decision applications, early applications looming in a couple weeks, if you're the parent of a senior or you're the friend of a parent of a senior, you might know what that patience looks like or doesn't look like. Long weekend always seems to come at the right time, and it's coming this weekend for sure. So a perspective and a balance of perspective is really important as we think about the college process. And no matter the advice, the information, the data you look at, we're going to share perspective throughout this journey with your students. What we choose to talk about is really important, but how we choose to talk about it is also really critical. The how we do things is really important, and I hope that that's a word that you hear throughout your journey with us, whether you're a 9th grade first-year parent or you're about to start the college search journey with us as early as this December. So having perspective as a counselor, students, parents is really important, which is why it's really important that we recognize that we have such an amazing guest with us tonight to offer some perspective. Perhaps this feels like a little bit like a bait and switch, because what you thought was going to be an hour with the college counseling team, we have a bonus to share with you. Dean Karen Richardson is joining us from Princeton University this evening. I just want to give a little bit of an introduction for Karen. I hope I don't embarrass her. We're incredibly fortunate because Karen knows Petty, which is probably the most important thing to lead with. Dean Richardson graduated from Princeton in 1993 with her BA in politics, and somehow skirted law school, decided that that wasn't going to be her path, and instead pursued her master's work at Harvard University Graduate School of Education, graduating in 1997. She returned to Princeton for a few years before she was called up to Boston, where she served as the deputy superintendent of the Boston Public Schools for a few years, and then later joined the Office of Admissions at Tufts University, where she served in a number of different roles, finally as the Dean of Admissions and Enrollment Management. And in those roles at Tufts are when we got to know Karen in her role as a representative for Petty. She had to find our new offices today. She remembers the old offices in the Student Center. And then the gravity of New Jersey, which New Jersey does have a gravity, particularly Central Jersey, called Karen back home, where she assumed her current duties as the Dean of Admission at Princeton University in the summer of 2019. Upon her appointment to Princeton, President Christopher Eisgruber referenced Dean Richardson's remarkable track record as a pioneer in the field of college admissions and highlighted her heartfelt commitment to diversity and inclusion. Her Princeton colleagues commented on her integrity, her judgment, her innovation, her compassion, and her kindness. In one of her very first blogs as the Dean of Admission at Princeton, Karen shared, "For me, being an admission professional allows me to do the work that I love, talk with people, introduce opportunities, dispel myths about how decisions are made, and help build an intentional community for a college campus." What a wonderful perspective that is. I mentioned that Dean Richardson has visited Petty many times, sometimes twice in one year, for fall visits as well as the college fair in the spring. And she's now just a short hop, skip, and a jump across Route 1, although we learned tonight sometimes flooding makes that commute a little bit longer. Dean Richardson, it's wonderful to have you back at Petty. Thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective with us tonight.
Oh, shucks, Joe, thank you. That was a little embarrassing, but it's really nice to be here with you all this evening. He took a lot of what I was going to say, that I spent some time at Tufts University in Massachusetts and was the representative for Petty. So it is exciting to be back, and it's true that I do know Petty, and I have to say that you are lucky to have the best college counseling team in the area. Don't tell anybody else in the area I said that, but you do have the best college counseling team in the area, and you'll be thrilled to work with them over the next several years. So I'm excited to be here. Tonight's presentation, of course, is not about Princeton. It's more broadly about highly selective admission. So, and we'll leave some time at the end for any questions. So this is actually one of my favorite emojis. Hopefully, ninth grade parents, hopefully you don't feel like this yet when you think about college admissions. But I suspect that as your children progress in years, as you get to 10th grade and 11th grade, and as they're starting to think about it more, you're starting to feel a little bit more like this. And so I decided that as part of tonight's address, I would try to address a couple of the myths and I think some of the misperceptions that exist out there about college admission, and hopefully bring that anxiety level down just a little bit. So let's get started. So myth number one, colleges have a prototype that they're looking for, and an applicant needs to fit that mold. So actually, we want to know who a student is. Our job is to build intentional communities, and in order to do that, we need to know who a student is, what's important to them, how they spend their time outside of the classroom, the things that excite them academically, and who they might be on our campuses. And at the same time, COVID changed everything, right? So it upended everything, not just here at Petty, but across our pool of potential applicants. The way students learned, perhaps students were in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment, how grades might have been distributed, no access to extracurriculars, which feels like a double whammy in a lot of ways, because extracurriculars can help you get some of that stress and anxiety out, but also students start to think, well, if I don't have extracurriculars, what am I going to write about and have on my application? There were no opportunities to visit college campuses as we shut down as well. But one of the things that I do want to assure you is that admission offices know all of this. We know that everything was in upheaval over the past year and a half, almost 2 years. I will continue to remind you that it's a human process, and that there are humans on the other side of when your child pushes that button to apply to schools. So we've all been in that same place where our lives have been sort of halted a little bit too. So we're always going to be thinking about things in context. We will always be looking at and evaluating applications based on knowing that there were just opportunities that students might not have had over the past couple of years. So, myth number 2, only well-rounded students get into highly selective colleges. Has anybody heard that? Have you heard well-rounded a lot? Well, I honestly think that the term well-rounded tends to be a little bit overused. There's sometimes, I think, this idea out there that every student must have a sport, they must play an instrument, and then they must write for the school paper. And that's actually just not true. It's okay. If somebody said, that's what my child does, that's okay. But I always encourage students to do what makes them happy. And what's important here is that colleges need a lot of different types of students to make them the dynamic campuses that they are. So colleges need both generalists, those students who are involved in a number of different activities. Hopefully those students will have gone a little bit deeper into 1 or 2 activities, showing where their true interests are, and maybe they can point to 1 or 2 of the favorite activities. But a college also needs people who are specialists, those students who go really deeply into one activity. Maybe it's a longer-term commitment that they have. They might have been recognized for it at the school level or at the state level. I often use the example of a swimmer. So swimmers spend a lot of time in the pool. They're there before school, they might be there after school, they might not have a lot of time for other things. Or the student who has been playing the piano since they were 10 and are performing in a number of different concerts or in an orchestra. So a school, a college or university needs both of those types of students. Neither one is right or more right than the other. Again, it's about a student doing the things that they enjoy and make them happy, and then telling that college or university about it. We want to meet students where they are. Myth number 3, an applicant's grades have to be flawless. They need perfect test scores, if they provide test scores, and they have to be the captain, president, or leader of everything to stand out. First of all, if Princeton's campus, everyone was the leader or captain of everything, it is not a place I would want to be, just so you know. But when we talk about holistic review and the things that my team and I look at, or any college admission office will be looking at, grades and test scores, if the test scores are provided, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, are important. But so are a lot of other pieces of that application, right? When we talk about holistic review, we're talking about whole person review. Yes, our job is to ensure that every student who is admitted to our campuses will be able to thrive academically. It doesn't mean that they won't struggle a little bit. College is about academic challenge, and so we do want to see that a student will be able to survive and feel like they're thriving academically. So the classes that a student takes in high school and secondary school are important. We're looking at not just the classes that they're taking, but the rigor of the classes. So we want to see that a student challenges themselves within the curriculum that is available to them, because college is going to be about challenging them, and we want to see how they've started to do that. Doesn't mean that every student has to take every AP class that is available. But again, we do want to see that they have started to take some of those classes. We take into account the trends on the transcript, recognizing that 9th grade might be a year that a student is really getting acclimated to the types of classes that they have. We want to see, are they increasing in rigor, and are their grades getting better? So we are looking at those trends on the transcript. We look at recommendation letters, and we take them very seriously. Recommendation letters are important because we unfortunately don't have a chance to sit down and have a half an hour conversation with every student who applies, but we do rely on the people who know them well to tell us a little bit more about who the student is and who they might be in our classrooms on our campuses. So a counselor recommendation is important, teacher recommendations are important. It's about people who can tell us more than that they came to class every day, but making sure that it's someone, and I will say this a little bit later, but choosing people who know your student and can tell us a little bit more about who they are. Interviews, I put an asterisk by that because interviews aren't required of a college application, but often they can be useful to a student because they are an opportunity for them to learn a little bit more from either a staff member, if the college provides interviews through their admission staff, or also they might be able to have an interview with an alum. And that's an opportunity to learn more from someone who's been a student there. And that's the type of interviews that Princeton does. Potential contributions to student life, and that's a little bit thinking about who is the student going to be, not just in the classroom, not just academically, but as we like to talk about, who are they going to be in their dorm room? What kind of roommate will they be? Who will they be on the soccer field, or in the orchestra, or in any type of group activity? We want to be thinking about bringing together this intentional community, and what is the student going to add to the academic and social fabric of the university? And finally, institutional priorities are things that come into a review in a selective college admission process. Those are things that, depending on the college, those institutional priorities can change from year to year. It might be about, there's a new department, for example. There might be a new Slavic languages department. And that year, students who are interested in studying Russian might be looked at a little bit differently. Doesn't mean that everybody should indicate that they want to study Russian. Obviously, we're going to be looking at applications closely to see if it all comes together. But there are different things that, as part of putting together this intentional community, we will be thinking about as well. So finally, myth number 4. College admission officers are all robots, and they can't possibly read all of those applications. So I will say, I'm here, I'm not a robot, and we do actually read everything. It's important to remember that this is it's a human process, and it is, as I said before, there are humans on the other side of students pressing that button as they are thinking about colleges. Our team and all college admission teams really bring diverse perspectives, which is why we have a number of people on our team. We are thinking about your students, thinking about your children and what they might bring to our campus. And it's wonderful because we bring all of these different backgrounds and experiences to the discussions that we have as we're bringing together this intentional community. And finally, as I said, the goal is to build this intentional community that's going to come together. Things that are important to us are having intellectual discourse on campus, for example. We want to bring together students who have different perspectives, who come from different backgrounds, whether it's geographic background, socioeconomic background, difference in academic interests, those types of things. But it's important to us that students want to have this discourse in a very respectful way. We do think that having these conversations on campus with people who might not always agree with you is an important piece of learning, and it's what makes a college campus a dynamic one. So I would wrap up by saying, and then we'll take some questions, as you enter into this world of thinking about the college process, encourage your child to challenge themselves academically. As I said, that's going to be an important piece of that rigor of curriculum. Also encourage them to do things they enjoy, not just for their college applications. As I mentioned, when a student is involved in something that is interesting to them, that comes through in their application, and that helps us to get to know them a little bit better as they are excited about the work that they're doing. Remember that nice counts. As a residential community, we are, again, trying to build this community that will come together and learn a lot from each other. But in order to do that, they need to be able to have conversations, they need to be able to disagree, but in ways that are going to be respectful. And so we're always looking for indicators as we're reading applications, from recommendations, from essays, of who the student is and how they would engage with people who are very different from them. I would encourage them to enjoy high school. It's the only high school career that you get. And I would also encourage them and all of you to breathe through this process. I know it's easy for me to say on this side of my own college admission process and on this side of the desk, but it's an important process, and it's one that can be fun and interesting as students seek out what it is that they are interested in doing. They don't have to know at the beginning of the process, and they don't even have to know what they want to major in once they get to the actual college campus. There's room for exploration, and you should definitely encourage them to do that. So with that, I'm going to put up the questions and see what we can answer.
Karen, thank you so much. So we have a couple mics. The only thing we ask is that when you do ask your question, even if you have that great indoor voice where you think you don't need the microphone for the live feed, please wait and we'll hand the microphone to you so you can ask questions. And you can ask questions specifically of Karen, or any questions that you think that we might be able to help answer as well.
Hello. If I could ask, what's your view on the trends on testing? Given COVID, we saw a lot of test optional, and I'm even hearing about tests refused. Some schools are not accepting them at all, not even optional. And I'm not sure if this is a sort of a transient trend or a long-term trend, so any comment you could provide would be helpful.
Sure. So, yes, most schools, including Princeton, went test optional last year because we recognized that it was impossible for students to be able to access testing, particularly in a safe way. And we did not want students putting their health at risk in order to be able to take a test. We decided, and a number of schools decided, to continue a test optional practice this year. We needed to make that decision late last winter because juniors particularly were starting to sign up for testing last spring, and we just didn't know what it was going to look like. So there are a number of schools that are going to continue to be test optional this year. I think we will continue to evaluate what it looks like. Personally for Princeton, we do believe that testing can be useful in our holistic process, just because we receive applications from over 12,000 high schools, and every high school looks a little bit different in terms of the grading that they do, and what an A might mean versus what a B might mean, or a C. And so testing in context and testing as one piece of our evaluation can be useful. So we are continuing to think about, is it something that we still believe it is an important piece. Now, I can't speak for any of my peers or colleagues at other schools. I think each school is doing their own evaluation of what it means to their process. As you said, there are some schools that also have gone test blind, which means that even if students do submit testing, it's not going to be considered as part of the application. So there are fewer schools that have gone test blind than test optional, but I think all of us are at a place where we're just going to need to evaluate over the next year or so to see where that trend is going. You had too much fun at the tent, right?
Thank you, Karen. I'm pretty new to all those things, but I saw you have a concept called intentional community. That's very interesting. Could you detail a little bit, say how school, what's the intention they want to build? Is some example like that? Thank you.
Sure. So when I talk about intentional community, as I was saying, part of what's important to Princeton and to a lot of college campuses is we want to bring together a class, a first-year class, and a transfer class, honestly, but a first-year class particularly, that's going to come together and is going to learn a lot from each other, and from our faculty, and from being on campus. So not just in their classrooms, but also in the activities that they're involved in, the lectures that they go to outside of class, those types of things. So when we think about that intentional community, it means that we want diversity in a number of different ways. So it's not just about racial and ethnic diversity. I think that tends to be the first thing that we think about when we hear the word diversity, but we're also talking about geographic diversity. We want students from around the world and across the country. We're talking about socioeconomic diversity, and the experiences that students have had coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds. That brings a lot to bear to the conversations that students have in their classrooms and in the social conversations that happen on campus. We want students who are coming from, who are interested in different types of academic possibilities. So we don't ask students to declare what they want to concentrate in on the first day when they arrive. They do have some time to sort of explore. As a liberal arts research university, we do really want our students to think about different types of areas that they might want to concentrate in, but we also want to bring together the computer science concentrators and the history concentrators and the politics concentrators and sociology and philosophy. So when I talk about intentional community, it's about bringing together a group of students who have different perspectives, and they will bring those different perspectives to bear in the conversations that they have on campus, and that's where the learning really happens.
Thanks, Karen. What is your advice to students with regards to early decision as when they're seniors, deciding between getting acceptances from multiple colleges versus committing to one college initially? Just wanted to hear your take on it. Thank you.
Sure. So I always say that early decision or early action, but early decision especially, should never be used as a strategy, right? So my advice is always, if you are interested and you truly know that a particular school is where you want to end up, then early decision might be the route to go. Keeping in mind that early decision, of course, is a binding decision, and students who are admitted to a school that has early decision are expected to attend. Princeton actually uses single choice early action, which is not binding, but you can only apply to one of the single choice early action programs. So I think it has to be a very personal decision for a student and their family. Some of it is about, particularly when early decision, thinking a student who might need to compare different financial aid packages, early decision might not be the best route to go. Although if a student, applies early decision and after working with a financial aid office, the family is not able to make it work, that would be the one reason they would get out of an early decision sort of agreement, though we don't encourage that. I'm looking at your college counselor as I'm saying this. But I think that a student has to determine if their true interest lies there. I would say, I think the question that often comes up along with this is, well, is it easier to get in an early program? And the truth is that it's sort of, it's apples and oranges. The numbers at an early admission there are usually fewer applications at that point than in a regular decision applicant pool. So yes, the admit rate might look a little bit different. But from the admission perspective, we're reading applications exactly the same across all of our rounds. So the students who we admit early are students who we believe we would admit whenever they applied because they're strong, they're going to be great fits for our campus, they're going to be a great part of this intentional community that we're building. So it's not an advantage. But again, I think it has to be up to the student and their family, working with their counselors to determine if early is the best way for them to go.
Karen, can I build on that question a little
Sure.
bit? Having had two different experiences at both Tufts and Princeton, two different institutions with some things in common and maybe some differences, can you share a little bit of your perspective on how to help families early in the college search as they're wide open and looking at different types of colleges and looking for the differences and similarities between different institutions?
Sure. So you're talking about just the college search in general and the types of things to keep in mind?
Yeah,
as-
we often talk about, let's start with college first and
Yeah.
then talk about colleges
Right.
separately. So yeah, a little bit about that, please.
Sure. So, I always encourage students when they're thinking about making those lists, right, about what they're interested in, starting with the broad and then sort of narrowing it down a little bit. So thinking about the size of school that you want to be in. Do you want to be in a place where you feel like you know a lot of your classmates, or do you want to be in a place that you feel like you're always meeting new people, right? So it's about the size of the student body. I also, geographic location is an important thing to think about as you're thinking about those broader sort of narrowing it down. Thinking about liberal arts colleges versus research universities. Does a student want to be in a place where there are sort of pre-professional majors that are available to them, or are they a student who wants to be able to think across a curriculum to explore a number of different things? I also always encourage students to think about what's available outside of the classroom, because honestly, you spend more time out of class than you do in class. And chances are that even if a student goes into the college search process, or even once they arrive on their college campus thinking, chemistry is where it's at, that's what I want to study, often they change their minds, and that's okay. I think that's the beauty of a liberal arts curriculum. But you want to, a student wants to ensure that they'd still find things on a particular campus that would interest them and would make them excited to be there. I hope I answered that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was one in the back.
Thank you. COVID have significant impact to application process, like the school visit or testing. But do you see any impact on your selection criteria or priorities? Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but
And I think part of the question has to do with how you read applications with some of the requirements that you still have, and maybe for students who apply without testing, that go test optional, and is there a difference? And are some of those different, whether it's a college visit or some things that are variables that impact some of your decisions in selection?
great, thank you. So, when a school says they are test optional, I want you to definitely believe them. I know it's hard to believe, but we, again, recognize that it was difficult for students to access those tests. So, we actually ask on our application, are you planning to submit testing? And if you say no, then we know that your application is complete and we can review it. So we're not looking at, we don't give extra credit or anything to students who do submit testing. I think one of the things to remember that it's still important to us, we're still looking at, holistically, we're looking at everything, but we're still looking at a student's transcript closely. Because again, our job is to ensure that students can really feel like they can thrive academically on campus. And so we're always looking for clues in that. So there's nothing that has become less important as part of that review. We're still looking at everything that we would have looked at in pre-COVID times, or the before times, as I like to think about them. So there's no disadvantage for a student who does not submit testing as part of our process.
I would add too, with regard to the campus visit, there are some schools, and I think fewer schools, where demonstrated interest plays a role in admissions decisions. And I think, like testing, the demonstrated interest part plays into an access piece, which is kind of reducing some barriers for students and families with regard to college admissions. And I think there are some schools that track interest, and we work with our students to identify those schools, but the trend seems to be kind of going the opposite direction.
We do not track interest.
Given the recent trends and discussions about private versus public education, how do folks in your field think about schools like Petty that obviously offer students an advantage over a public education?
So how do we think about schools like Petty that offer an advantage? I mean, again, I think it's important to recognize that we evaluate students on an individual basis and within the context of the school that they attend, their high school. So we're not comparing students who attend Petty to a local public high school. We're looking at students within the particular context of the school that they attend.
I think that's really important. It's one of the things we talk about often, which is the context of Petty. Similar to Petty, your students, although very different and diverse, we hope they're connected by three things: curiosity, excitement, and character. And I think when Karen talks about admissions offices, admissions teams crafting intentionally their classes of first-year students, it kind of goes into that, within the context of the school from which students are applying.
I often say that context is an admission officer's best friend, because we're always trying to figure out sort of where a student is coming from, right? So their school, their family, their neighborhood, what access have they had to different things, and putting that all into context as we evaluate applications.
I think there are two words that you'll hear a lot, parents: context and it depends. Those are college admissions phrases that we all share.
Hi, I'd like to flip that question around on the public and private college perspective. Can you provide any insight onto what the benefits or opportunities are in a private versus a public college?
Do you want to start there? Given that I've worked at two private schools.
Sure. I love to receive punts, for sure. So absolutely, and the conversations we have with our juniors, when we have those conversations about college, often start with the range of schools on the spectrum, and before we narrow down some of those conversations. And we talk about the difference between small private liberal arts colleges and larger state flagship universities across the country, and then internationally as well, and talking about the differences. There are different academic focuses at international schools than there are when it comes to schools in the United States. The admissions review is also different. We believe in a holistic review in the US, and most schools in the UK and in Europe do not. So we have those conversations about what those experiences might be when students are kind of considering different schools. Often the conversations about resources comes into play when we talk about the budgets and endowments at state universities compared to well-funded private universities, and where the money shifts the focus, whether it's the teaching focus, the research focus. It's a really good question because I think it forces students and families to dig deeper into the different types of schools and different types of school experiences. I think it makes sense to pay attention to certain state university systems in states where funding is an issue and what that will mean for the student experience once they're there. What does it mean to go to school at a state university where the majority of students are from that state compared to a smaller college which may have a broader range of students from different parts of the US or the world? I think it's a good question because I think it gets at a bigger question, which is what are some of the variables you look at?
So I saw several items on the list of things to look for, and one of them was institutional priorities. How does your child capture that? How do they not apply to a institution that doesn't want them?
So when I talk about institutional priorities, and that's the one area, honestly, that students don't really have any control over. Every school has, as I said, different priorities that will shift from year to year, often, and it could be something, as I said, like a new department, or all of the classics majors have graduated, all of the senior classics majors, and there's a classics department that needs to be populated. So it just depends. Unfortunately, as I said, the institutional priorities is the one piece that students don't have any control over, but it is a true piece of an admission officer's job as we're thinking about this overall class. We also have to think about the priorities. For Princeton, one of our institutional priorities is socioeconomic diversity and in ensuring that we are available to students from a wide range of backgrounds. So it might be something as broad as socioeconomic diversity, or it might be something like there's no tuba player for the band. So there are definitely pieces, but it's the one piece that we have to keep in mind as we are pulling together a class.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to speak with us tonight. I have a question about a follow-up in terms of the intentional community that you're creating or would like to create, and in terms of the declared major of the applicant. Is it important for the student to, in their application, say what they would like to study, or if they have more than one interest, is it okay to be undecided? Do you read the application in the context of their declared major?
Sure. So it is absolutely okay for a student to say that they are undecided. Typically, at Princeton, for example, we do ask a student, are you interested in a Bachelor of Arts degree? Are you interested in a Bachelor of Science and Engineering degree? And then under that, on the Common Application and other application platforms, there are usually 2 or 3 opportunities for students to tell us what within those degrees they might be interested in. It's okay to be undecided. I will say that students who tell us they're interested in engineering, for example, yes, we are looking specifically to see, has a student taken a high-level math class? Have they taken physics? Because those are going to be important to being a successful engineer at Princeton. If a student tells us that they are interested in the sciences and in biology, then yes, we're gonna look a little bit to see what have they done already, where are their interests, those types of things. So it's not, and again, we don't hold a student to, well, you said on your application you wanted to study philosophy. We recognize that students might change their minds, but it is absolutely okay to be undecided.
Hi, thank you so much for creating this opportunity for all of us. Specifically for that our daughter is a junior, in terms of Petty, when does this process, you were saying before about with juniors, when does this process begin with the college counselors here at Petty, and what is the level of involvement that the parents have in the process as well?
On behalf of all the parents, thank you for asking that question. I think that's probably a question on many of your minds. I guess it kind of started tonight in some regards. Officially, we start working with our students in December of the junior year. And I say officially, that's when they first make that connection with our office and are assigned a college counselor. So it kind of officially starts in December. For parents, it starts a little bit earlier in terms of our communication and our programming and things like that. Behind the scenes, a few things happen along the way. We're very fortunate that Mr. Edwards in our office teaches humanities. So he is entrenched in the ninth grade curriculum that ninth grade parents know well now. And then behind the scenes in the 10th grade year, we have academic advising, which all sophomores participate in at the end of the spring, where they meet with an academic counselor and start to talk about some of their curricular choices as they head into their junior year. The college office is part of those conversations with Mr. Sham, who coordinates that program with all the academic counselors. So we work kind of behind the scenes as students kind of continue their academic and intellectual journey at Petty. And then we kind of jump into the junior year, and we start kind of with some programming for parents. In a typical year, we have college evenings where we invite the juniors to come to some of those smaller college fairs before we start officially. I think the students will feel, particularly the sophomores and juniors, will feel like they're starting next Wednesday when, after they rest for a couple days at home, they come back to take the PSAT. And they take a standardized test if they haven't done that yet. But we'll start with the junior class in small groups in December. We also meet with parents in small groups as well. One of the benefits of the virtual world is that we've been able to reach our parents with a lot more accessibility wherever you may be. And then when we come back in January, we really kind of start the one-on-one counseling and meeting with our students. Our current seniors had to find us this fall. They have never been in our office. So if you remember anything from this evening, right, that I say, because I know you're going to remember everything that Karen shared tonight, but the college counseling office is the last building on the right before you hit Etro Road. We have a great red door, so that's where we are. You're always welcome to come in and ask questions, no matter what year your student is. And some of you are a little bit closer than others to kind of starting officially, so we realize that. But there's always questions that span all the class years. And the last thing I'll say is there are 4 full-time college counselors in the office at Petty, plus Ann Weisenberger, who kind of runs our ship as our office manager. But each of us is in charge of a class. We're kind of the spokesperson for the class. So I mentioned Grant Edwards, he's in charge of our 9th grade students. Everett Nolor kind of leads the sophomore class. Lisa McClellan takes care of our juniors. A lot of those questions have to do around testing and the uncertainty of testing as we head into the next cycle. And then I kind of coordinate the seniors, and we all work together with all of our seniors as well.
Thank you. A bunch of schools are offering online programs now. How does that affect the college process? I mean, the admission process.
So you're talking about high schools that are virtual, or?
No, I'm talking about colleges that are virtual. They offer online versions now.
Like information sessions, you mean?
No.
Oh, degrees?
Degree versions, yeah.
So you're saying if your child in high school is taking some of those online courses, is that the question, and how that should be? Sorry.
No, I mean, how does that affect the college admission process? Because, I mean, there's options now. I mean, they can either do the online version or do regular school.
I think the question, this is probably a response to the landscape changing, which is what are the opportunities for higher education beyond kind of a brick and mortar campus experience? What do online experiences tend to look like? I think that's happening on the secondary school level as well. We haven't seen that trend yet impact our students. But when it comes to researching opportunities, particularly over the last probably 18 months, as they've tried to kind of navigate online schooling in general, I think we're going to find that lots of schools think creatively about how they reach students. And some schools already do that with regard to satellite campuses and partnerships and things like that. I think it's institutional specific, but I think it'll be an interesting thing to pay attention to as our current students, and in particular our younger students, navigate some of the things that we don't even know may kind of take place.
Hi. I have a question about how kids can build their target list of schools. As they go to figure out what they're interested in, how do they define what their safety schools are, what their target schools are, and what their reach schools are? Not just based on geography or size, but their interests and just broadly their academic capabilities.
I'm not even give Karen the chance to
I was
punt
going to
this to
say,
me.
I'm going to let you answer.
Sure,
that
that's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of the work we do with our students. And I mentioned kind of the nuts and bolts of how we start, but one of the things I didn't mention yet is the conversation that we have initially, those first conversations that we have initially with your students have very little to do with college. We talk about the student experience first. So we have we call this the junior reflection. We ask them to talk about their petty experience before we even talk about colleges. We ask them to talk about what have been the most impactful experiences they've shared at Petty. We also ask the parents to do a little homework too and share from their perspective the experience that their student has had at Petty. So we start to get at the heart of that question, which is what they want to study, the fit for schools, some of the things that Karen mentioned with regard to different types of schools. Before we start to really lean into the admission selection part of this, which if you've been through this before, you might agree, it can become a runaway train a little bit if you start thinking about the data and the numbers. And we have plenty of the data and the numbers to talk about, and we will. And we hold off doing that until we're ready to do that. And when it comes to building a list of schools, the hope is that we've done so much work and conversation and thoughtful conversation, and your students are prepared to do that, particularly in the junior year when they've had a couple years at Petty to work on those skills, so that when we start to build that list, we're building upon a foundation of those conversations that we have to start. And then we start to share a little bit of data that helps us give us a sense of the context of admission decisions for Petty students at different schools. And we look at, and that's how we build kind of a balanced list of schools that include that big group of target schools. And I mentioned the reach kind of piece in our mission. Our students will reach, and we encourage them to reach. And then to balance that out, what we call 1 or 2 likely schools, which we tend to be pretty conservative about. But I think getting to the question of when we do that list, there's so much that goes into before we do that, and the conversation we have with your students. It is 8 o'clock on the dot. The folks that were leaving, I think we're going back to the tent. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming. Karen, thank you so much for spending your Friday evening with us.
Thank you.
And parents, enjoy tonight. Get down to the gym. It's going to be amazing. The work that our students did this summer is phenomenal. Enjoy tomorrow if you're here tomorrow, and have a great weekend with your students. And we will see you again soon.